Arcanine was always my favorite Gen 1 Pokemon. Not only was it an awesome design, it was also listed as a legendary Pokemon in the Pokedex. In spite of that, it got one of the worst typings and basically no move pool, and its stats left a lot to be desired. But what if this Pokemon got legendary stats? What if it was as good as a Mewtwo? Well, today that's what we're going to find out. So, Professor Oak's gonna find this random legendary Arcanine just walking around outside of Pallet Town, but little does he know that unlike most Arcanines, this one has stats that are actually god tier. The same as a Mewtwo, a complete genetic freak, and it's about to wreak havoc on all of Kanto, or at least so I hope. So here we are, we have our legendary Arcanine, and you can see those stats are not the stat spread of a normal Arcanine. We're coming in with 16 attack, 15 defense, 18 speed, and 21 special, and 26 HP at the start of the game. Our moveset and everything else about this Pokemon is basically unchanged. I simply made a very quick ROM hack of Pokemon Yellow. The only other change that has been made is that we will actually get level up moves. At the same levels that Growlithe would learn Flamethrower and Agility, this one will also learn those moves. It might not end up mattering, but let's find out. First things first, we've got to take on the rival with our legendary Arcanine. And the first thing that we're going to do is simply move a better move into the top slot. But here I think takedown is probably the way to go. We still have 110 base attack. Funny enough, in spite of the fact that Mewtwo is not known as a physical attacker, it has the same base attack as an Arcanine or a Snorlax has at 110 base. So the only things that have changed is really that this Arcanine's stats have gone up across the board. But it's going to be incredibly interesting to see how this Pokemon performs with these higher stats, in spite of the fact that it doesn't get as good of moves. We are still going to have to take on Brock with only Ember and Takedown as our attacking moves, and since he resists both of those attacks, this could still turn out to be borderline impossible on minimum battles. So we're going to go minimum battles as much as we can, but if we ever hit a wall, we're simply going to grind to damage rounding thresholds, levels that end in 0, 3, 5, or 8. Those are the spots where you do just a little extra damage each time. But at this point, we can simply make our way through all of the Viridian Forest, and it's straight to the required bug catcher where we can put our higher special stat on display. We're just going to use Ember, and it's clearly a 2-hit KO here. We're definitely doing enough damage to easily win that fight every single time. Now, we are running on 0 DVs, so this is the weakest possible Arcanine with the Mewtwo level stats, of course, which is why it's actually more like a better than the best possible Arcanine, but I'm still interested to see how this actually works out. So we're about to take our first attempt at Brock. Let's see if we can just burn our way through his gym. So Brock attempt number 1, I think the strategy comes down to just using Ember on this Geodude, and we actually want to burn this one. We can see it's doing like 8 to 10 damage per hit against us, so we cannot survive simply by just attacking it. But if we get the burn, we will cut its attack stat in half, and that could be the key to getting this fight to go. We have a 10% chance to burn him, and this time we burn him on turn 1. It doesn't matter that he uses the full heal. The full heal doesn't affect the drop in attack that he got, and he's already missed 2 tackles as well, so we get through on great health to Onix, and we're faster. It uses Screech on us, but we're just going to use Ember repeatedly, but it gets us in a bind and knocks us out. Are you kidding me? Now, it is worth noting that with a normal Arcanine, you would be sitting here basically fishing for multiple burns on the first Geodude to have any shot of getting through this, but still, we can see that it's far from consistent even if you had the best stats of any Pokemon in the game. But here we get another shot at the Onix, and this is basically a speed tie at this point, so we're just hoping to get the luck. When it uses Bite, I'm going to switch into Leer just to avoid damaging it, and after it unleashes energy, we'll go back into our Ember spam. Here we did not like the fact that it immediately uses Bite just after we used Ember, but here it uses Bite again, and we finally get the victory and get to level 8. So we beat Brock in 4 minutes and 15 seconds after 3 resets, but really not too bad for a fire-type Pokemon going up against a rock-type gym leader. That was way smoother than your normal attempts against Brock. And with that, we can simply move on in the game. where our next challenge is going to be Misty. Now, I thought about what stats to actually give this Pokemon in order to make it a quote-unquote legendary, and I decided on the Mewtwo stats for a couple of key reasons. Number one, Mewtwo has the best stats in the game. They're obviously higher than both Dragonite and Mew. But the other reason was because our biggest weakness as we go through the game is the water type. Water, of course, is special, but because Mewtwo has the highest special stat in Generation 1, it at least makes sense that with a higher special stat, Arcanine might just become an absolute beast. That being said, we're still going to have to deal with some pretty serious weaknesses to the rock and ground types that we don't really have an answer for. We're just going to have to hope that our better stats, better speed, better defense, better HP, all kind of go together in order to make fights that would otherwise be impossible possible. For now though, our high stats and our decent coverage mean that we have no problems with any of the Pokemon on our way to Mount Moon. We can simply just spam Ember or Takedown and get through all of these fights incredibly quickly. And we can simply avoid all of the trainers into Mount Moon until we get to this final super nerd at the end, where we're simply going to spam our Ember over and over again, and it's a 3-hit to take out the first Grimer. On the Voltorb, we can even switch into a Takedown to knock it out in 2 turns, and Takedown is technically our strongest move, just given the fact that we have reasonably high attack, so we can just 3-shot that coughing with the Takedown. We can then grab the Dome Fossil because everybody gets the Dome Fossil. Now it's time for Jesse and James, and I don't expect this fight to be particularly difficult. Yet again, we have higher stats than our opponents, and Ember is doing more than enough damage to easily get through these Pokemon. We're nearly one-shotting, in spite of the fact that Ember isn't really that strong. We get a 2-hitter on their coughing and get to level 14. But with all that out of the way, it's clear that the strategy in this next section has to be to take on rival number 2 first. We're not going to get through Misty at a lower level with a type disadvantage, no matter how much we boost our stats to be like a legendary. So we'll take on rival 2 for the first time. Let's see how he goes. So rival 2 attempt number 1, I'm simply going to use Ember on his Spearow. It appears to be a 2-hit KO. Out comes the Sandshrew, which is also a 2-hitter, though it does sand attack me once. And the Rattata is not quite a 1-hitter with our Ember. The accuracy is kind of terrible here, but it does use Tail Whip multiple times in a row, so we didn't take any damage there. And now the Eevee is actually less than 50% to hit us with a damaging move. It likes to just spam Tail Whip, Growl, and Sand Attack, so we get through easily and get to level 15. And with that fight done, it's time to just make our way across the Nugget Bridge, where I don't expect anything to be too terribly difficult here. Even against the Onix trainer, we have Ember, which is a special move. Onix has notoriously bad special, so we don't have to worry too much about these Pokemon, as we'll just basically hold Auto A and win. In fact, at this level, it looks like the Onix is just a 3-hit KO with Ember, so we easily get through that fight. Now, the most interesting thing about this Pokemon to me is that when we give it Mewtwo's stats, everything basically just goes up. Most people don't think of Mewtwo as a physical attacker, but its physical attacking stats are on par with a normal Arcanine. And while you think of Arcanine as an incredibly fast Pokemon with things like extreme speed in later gens, it's really not that fast in the grand scheme of things, only 95 base speed. But by getting the Mewtwo stats, we have much better speed at 130 base. And even Mewtwo's kind of frail defense at only base 90 is still better than what a normal Arcanine would have. So in every case, even in the worst stats, we've improved by at least 10 points in terms of our base stats overall. And as we make very quick work of the Oddish, we can simply make our way to Bill's house, where he's going to be completely shocked by this Pokemon that we brought. He's kind of saying, I wish I had combined myself with your legendary Arcanine. We'll let him know that we'll bring it back sometime in the future, but for now, we're going to go down and fight against the Innocent Bystander, where we can get access to the Dig TM, which is going to help massively on the Misty fight. Fortunately, we can just use one Ember to knock out the Machop. The Drowsy will come out next, and Takedown is a 2-hit KO here, but a very easy victory nonetheless. So I'm simply going to learn Dig immediately with my legendary Arcanine right over Roar, since Roar is the most useless move in the entire game. But with that done, I think it's time to take our first shot at Misty, given that we have a much higher special stat than we normally would. 154 base special is kind of beastly. So after we knock out this single Goldeen trainer, it's simply time to make our way to the gym leader and see if we can take her down. So first attempt against Misty. Let's see, we do in fact outspeed the Staryu, so we can just use Dig. It's gonna still be a 2-hit KO. I'm gonna use Takedown to finish it off. We level up to level 20, and out comes Starmie, but we are in fact faster than Starmie, so we can use Dig turn 1. We take a big Bubble Beam, then she X defense, but a critical hit knocks her out on the first attempt. So our legendary Arcanine completely destroys the second gym. Even without going to take on Rival 3, without taking any extra battles, we were able to beat her in 15 minutes and 53 seconds. That is insane. And we've had 3 resets so far, 1 TM, really not bad for a fire type in Gen 1. And with that being done, it's time to just make our way down to Vermilion City. We're going to be able to go straight to Lieutenant Surge and destroy him with Dig, so I think this whole section is going to be super easy. And it is really interesting to see a move as weak as Ember just one-shotting opponents here. It's a 2-hit KO on this Eradicate, but still, this move shouldn't be that strong, and yet it is because our special stat is just so high. That gives me a little bit of hope that in the late game, a move like Fire Blast might just be able to one-shot some really tough opponents. So for now, we're just going to stay on minimum battles. If we need a physical move in the late game, I'll just try to get something like Hyper Beam. We'll definitely be using Swift when we come up against Sabrina, but for now, we're going to take on Rival 3, and I think we got this one in the bag. So here against the Spearow, it's a 1-hit KO with Ember. Ember one-shots the Rattata. We're just going to stick with the Ember on Sandshrew, which is a 1-hit KO, and then it's a 2-hitter on the Eevee, but that fight was never in question, even going in without healing. Who cares? Easy win. So after getting the bike voucher, it's time to just go ahead and teach our Charmander how to use Cut. We're going to cut down this tree and make our way straight to Lieutenant Surge. He's not going to know what came for him when this Arcanine gets in here. So of course, we have to just let our dog dig through the trash for a minute here, but once we finally find these switches, we can make our way to Lieutenant Surge, and I think we're going to just leave him covered in dirt. So against Lieutenant Surge, we are still outsped by this Raichu, but I'm just going to use Dig. He growls turn 1, so we only did about half damage there, but his Mega Punch does basically nothing, and it's a 2-hit KO, so we easily beat him and get to level 22. So at 19 minutes, 39 seconds, we've beaten 3 gyms. We have no semblance of difficulty since Brock in this one, and with that, only 3 resets, 1 TM, we're just kind of cruising. Now, the big disadvantage we have, obviously, compared to a Mewtwo is the fact that we can't learn all of these TMs that we're picking up so far. No Thunderbolt, no Bubble Beam. We won't get things like Ice Beam later on. So really, we're going to be stuck with Dig for most of this run. It's clearly a useful move once we get to Agatha at the end of the game. And we're going to have to learn things like Swift for Sabrina. We're definitely going to learn Fire Blast at some point in this one. We're just going to be hoping that we can make these moves work for us as we try to get through the entire game. The current moveset, though, of Takedown, Dig, Leer, and of course, Ember is more than enough for this section, though. We can simply go Ember on the Wrapping Lass, and we're just one-shotting all of her Pokemon. Normally, you'd go Dig here because Ember isn't strong enough to necessarily knock those Pokemon out, just given the fact that Arcanine doesn't have amazing special. But with this special stat, there's nothing to even think about. Just hold down Auto A and get the easy wins. And the Slowbone Pokemaniac here can sometimes be difficult for these fire types, but yet again, I think we've got everything that we need to easily get through this one. We tank a Bone Club just fine, and here we can easily just go Dig on the Slowpoke. It turns out to be a 2-hit KO, but a very easy victory nonetheless. And here against the Rock Tunnel Hiker, again, usually a tough opponent for a lot of fire-type Pokemon, but here we have Dig. It's not a 1-hit KO, so we can use Ember to knock that one out after a Defense Curl, but as long as they don't Defense Curl or we get a critical hit, we can get the easy win, and they can even self-destruct while we're underground. Good job, buddy. Good job. And with this whole section of the game done, we can now make our way to Celadon City, where we should have a very easy time against Erica. En route, we'll just stop to get the Swift TM to save for just a little bit later in this run, and because Hyper Beam might be important later on, we will pick up things like nuggets, etc. as we go through these sections. And after routing around to grab items and 1 reset due to bad pathing, I am now ready to take on Erica, where I think we're going to get a very easy victory. She leads off with the Tangela, where we can simply go Ember, and this appears to be a 2-hit KO after a critical hit. Out next comes the Weepinbell. I'm going to use Ember again, and this is a 2-hit KO, followed by the Gloom. Let's just try Dig to see the range. It does about a third, so Ember's definitely the way to go here. She drops Acid, but we easily get the victory at 31 minutes and 29 seconds. So outside of a reset that cost me a little bit of time there as I was misrouting, we were able to get through this entire section on minimum battles, 4 gym badges down, only 4 resets so far. It's going really well in spite of our typing, but that could all change when we get to the late game. We got to keep in mind, Arcanine can normally beat Misty on minimum battles, just takes the right kind of luck to do it. We're just a little bit more consistent than we'd normally be. But with Erica down, it's now time to take on an incredibly easy section in the Rocket Game Corner where we should easily be able to defeat all of these opponents. And we can even buy some casino coins at this point with the money that we've amassed so far. And now in the basement, it's time to take on Jesse and James for the second time, where we've already got a perfect moveset to deal with them. We can simply use Dig on the coughing. I just misclicked and used Ember instead, but then Ember's gonna make very short work of Meowth. Out comes the Ekans, where Dig, even after a growl, is more than enough to 1-hit KO it. And with that, it's time to get into the Giovanni fight, where he's gonna lead off with his Onyx, but I don't think it's that big of a deal. Dig is easy enough to just 1-hit KO it. We get to level 28, and now Dig does not quite one-shot the Rhyhorn, funny enough, but we knock it out on the next turn with an Ember, and here we can simply go Ember or Dig, I think, at this point on the Persian. We knock it out in 2 hits. It's a very easy victory. And with the Silph Scope in tow, we can simply make our way out of the Rocket Game Corner, and it's time to go take on rival number 4 over in Lavender Town. The rival leads off with his Fearow, which I think we can even use a move like Takedown. It's going to be a 2-hit KO to knock it out. Magnemite is then easy to take out with a single Dig. Out comes the Shelder, against whom I also think we simply Dig. It uses a withdraw, but a critical hit one-shots it. We can Ember on the Sandshrew, and finally on the Eevee, Dig is the stronger move, and 2 hits is enough to simply knock it out. And now Arcanine can reap the benefits of its higher speed and the fact that Dig is super effective against ghosts to easily get through these channelers on the way to the top of the tower. In fact, the only real threat in this section is of course Cubone's mother, who we saw in the last episode. She turned out not to be that good with the ghost typing, and here 2 Embers is enough to knock her out. But with that, it's time to take on our third fight against Jesse and James, where we can simply lead off with an Ember on the Meowth and get a 1-hit KO. Dig is going to one-shot the Arbok, and now Weezing is pretty bulky. We need 2 hits to knock it out. 1 Dig, 1 Ember, it gets the job done. With that, we've saved Mr. Fuji. We can get the Pokeflute. It's time to move on to the game, where I think our next target is of course Koga. Against Koga, we have a couple of advantages. Number 1, he's only going to use moves like Psychic against us, and the fact that we have a much higher special stat should make it easier to survive those attacks, and our fire type moves are super effective, so we should have a decent chance of getting through this, but let's see how the ranges actually work out. But before we can reach Koga, we do have to knock out the 2 jugglers before him. They are using Psychic type Pokemon. Fortunately, our good speed means that we'll just outspeed here against these Drowsies. They're not 1-hit KOs with Dig though. We do get a one-shot the Kadabra, however, and against the Drowsies, they're not going to do enough damage to knock us out. So really, we can just get them both all down with 2 hitters here. But now the question is, how do we do against Koga himself? Our higher special stat should mean that Ember's pretty strong here, but it might not work out. He could get something like Toxic right away, and we could just end up taking a bunch of resets on this fight. So first attempt against Koga, I'm just going to use Ember, and we get a critical hit one-shot on the first Venonat. The second Venonat, it's not a one-hitter, but we do have a 2-hit range as he uses an X attack. The third Venonat comes out and hits us with Psychic, but does very little damage. Out comes the Venomoth, where we're simply going to use Ember as it used a double team, and it's just using double team like crazy, though we do get the burn. He lands the Toxic on us, but if we can land 1 more hit, we will win this fight. It's just a question of who hits first. Here he uses double team though, and the burn knocks him out, so we beat Koga on the first attempt. with our legendary Arcanine. 42 minutes and 3 seconds to get through that section, still only 4 resets and 1 TM. The fact that we didn't get an upgraded fire type move did not affect that one too much. He just was kind of cheesing with the double team, but the lucky burn was all that we needed to get through that one. And hey, it's a little bit lucky, but I will absolutely take it. And fortunately, we are able to get back to the Pokemon Center before the poison knocks us out. So even if this was a Nuzlocke, your legendary Arcanine would be safe. And as it turns out that our inventory was full, we decided to take a quick detour to the Fuchsia Pokemart, the one that nobody knows actually exists. But now we need to decide how to route in the game, and I'm actually going to go and take on Blaine next. Blaine gives us access to a badge boost in Special, and since our Special stat is already really good, that extra boost plus the Fire Blast TM might be enough to just make us super overpowered in this next section. Now we are somewhat under leveled coming in here, and yes, Blaine can be hard even for a fire type in this generation, but I'm just hopeful that Dig will be enough. Let's get into it and find out. So first attempt against Blaine, we are up against his Ninetales and we actually outspeed it. So we can use Dig. It does about half damage. The Flamethrower did really good damage after a crit there, but we knock it out in 3 hits. Out next is the Rapidash, which is faster than us, but it misses a Fire Spin. And once again, we did about half damage, but a critical hit Stomp knocked me out. I'm not ready to give up on this one just yet though, so let's take a couple more attempts here. A couple attempts later, we get 2 Tail Whips from that first Ninetales. So we do get outspeed and we critical hit against the Rapidash, but its critical hit with takedown did massive damage. Still, we get our first attempt at the Arcanine. We are slower than this Pokemon, so it easily knocks us out because his Arcanine is also apparently legendary. So based on that, I think this fight is impossible, so instead I'm going to go ahead and try to take on the rival instead. This is one of the problems with changing base stats, is that you can't actually change it just in your game, at least not easily with GameHook. Instead, I actually made a quick little ROM hack where we changed the base stats of all Arcanines in the game. So it might turn out that Blaine is actually the strongest gym leader in the entire game at this point. But fortunately, the rival in Pokemon Yellow does not have an Arcanine, so we aren't going to have to deal with that. If this were Red and Blue though, we might have a serious challenge on our hands. For now, let's just get into the Rival 5 fight and see if we can beat him at our current level. So here against the Sandslash, I'm going to go Ember, and it's going to be a 2-hit KO. He critical hits us with a Slash though. Out next comes the Cloyster, and I think that Ember is still the better play. We get knocked out by a Clamp after a miss though. Let's try this again. In this one, we can see Ember does more than half against the Cloyster on the first turn with a crit, but we just could not get the range on the second turn. So this is looking like a spot where we might need to go for rare candies if we're going to stay on minimum battles. We do have 8 in the bag, so I'm just going to go ahead and get to level 35 just to see if it improves my ranges against these opponents. But level 35 doesn't seem to be enough, so I decide I'm just going to go kind of hard on the rare candies here. Because at level 39, I actually get to learn Agility thanks to this little change that I've made. It's the level that a Growlithe would normally learn this move, and that move will allow us to badge boost against our opponents. This could make a massive difference. Now at this level, Ember's still not quite 2-hit KOing the Sandslash, and it's still a 3-hit KO range against the Cloyster as well. But we are more survivable, so in spite of a single accuracy drop, we are getting through to the Kadabra now, where if we can just land a Dig, it should knock this Pokemon out. And finally on the Flareon, we just need a Dig to land, and we get the victory. So at level 39, going up to level 40, we were able to win that fight. And this is the point where the badge boost glitch might help us a lot. But first things first, it's time to take on Jesse and James, where I'm simply going to Dig against their Weezing and get the easy KO. We'll use Dig on Arbok as well. We get a Gen 1 miss. So we'll switch into Takedown at this point, and then Ember's probably enough for Meowth. And after quickly healing up outside, we can take on Giovanni, where I'm simply going to Dig against the Nidorino for an easy 1-hit KO. We can go into Ember. It looks to be a 3-hitter against this Persian. Out next is the Rhyhorn. We did take a single Growl, which cut our attack stat pretty significantly, so it's a 2-hitter there against the Rhyhorn. Then against the Nidoqueen, it also looks to be a 2-hit KO. We get paralyzed by a body slam, and we're fully paralyzed underground, which means that he can't actually hit us. But I'm just going to keep using Dig. I think it's the best play, and we can easily knock him out in 3 hits. So the entire Silph section is done. It did take rare candies to make it manageable, but now we can simply progress in the game. And Sabrina should be incredibly easy here as long as we go ahead and learn the move Swift. Our agility will guarantee that we just outspeed all of her Pokemon, and we can simply use Swift to guarantee that even if she gets accuracy drops on us, she can't actually prevent us from hitting her. That being said, it might not even be necessary to do that, so I'm going to go in once with my moveset as is, and if it fails, we'll replace something like Takedown with Swift in order to try to get this one to go. The first attempt against Sabrina, I'm simply using Dig. We outspeed the Abra and one-shot it. Kadabra is also slower, though it's not a one-hit KO after a X-Defend. We're going to go Takedown here on the Alakazam. She X-Defends and then uses Psychic, which does good damage, but we still knock her out. Our high special was more than enough, so in 58 minutes and 20 seconds, we have beaten another gym. It's only 14 resets so far. Most of those resets came from me trying to find a way to get through Blaine and a couple on the rival, but after using rare candies, we can definitely say that we can take down at least 6 gyms on minimum battles with an Arcanine, provided of course that it is legendary. But with Sabrina done, we now have no choice. We have to fight Blaine if we're going to stay on minimum battles, if we're not going to start grinding some extra levels. So let's go ahead and get into this fight where now the fact that we have agility for the badge boost glitch might be enough to get us through this. So first things first, I'm going to set up my 3 agilities on this first Ninetales. We do get confused by Confuse Ray and a Tail Whip, but that shouldn't really matter. At this point, we just need to actually manage our digs. We don't get it on that attempt and we have to take a reset. On the next attempt, however, we don't get confused and we one-shot the Ninetales. We get to one-shot against the Rapidash. We're going to outspeed his Arcanine and it uses a flamethrower, but this looks to be a 2-hit KO and we easily beat Blaine thanks to the badge boost glitch and the fact that we could just outspeed everything at this point. So in 59 minutes and 34 seconds, another badge down, only 1 reset to get through Blaine that time, and we are cruising on the Giovanni. Giovanni is where a normal Arcanine, however, usually hits a wall on minimum battles. Of course, a normal Arcanine does not have agility, and it doesn't have these amazing stats as a legendary Pokemon. So it's just a question if the extra stats plus badge boosts will be enough to get us through this fight, or is it going to still turn out to be borderline impossible? I will take this opportunity to upgrade my fire type move by learning Fire Blast over Ember. I think it's the best play, and we're also going to drop some PP ups into that move just to give ourselves more Fire Blasts to use in these next few battles. And with that, it's time to take on Giovanni for the first time and find out if this is finally enough to get Arcanine through. So first things first, we actually outspeed the Doug trio here. I'm going to start setting up agility, hoping that it uses Dig. Instead, it uses Earthquake and gets a critical hit and just one-shots me. Now, that's to be expected some percentage of the time, but if he just uses Dig, we can actually perfectly time him out, and we can just use this opportunity to set up the badge boost glitch. Fissure also does nothing, and since we outspeed, we just one-shot him with a Dig. We'll go Fire Blast on the Persian, which gets an easy one-hit KO. Now against the Nidoqueen, I'm going to go for Dig. A critical hit does not one-hit KO it though, and we got hit with a huge Earthquake. He guard specs with the Nidoking, but then he hits Earthquake the next turn and we lose this attempt. So what's pretty clear here is that we're leveling up after the Persian, and that is affecting whether or not we can get through this fight. So the best thing that we can do, I think, is to drop a rare candy. We definitely will want to have at least 1 rare candy for Lorelei and 1 before Lance, due to the fact that they're also going to use super effective moves against us. and we might need to manipulate our badge boost. But in this one, I think we just have to be able to set up the badge boost glitch to get through to the end of this fight. Now the question is, would Fire Blast do more damage given the fact that we have a much higher special stat? So on the next attempt, I try it out, and we do in fact get the one hitter with the Fire Blast. Unfortunately, it misses on Nidoking, but I think this might be the strategy to get through. But it turns out that even the Fire Blast is a range here. Fortunately, we do survive the dig from the Nidoqueen, so we knock it out on the next turn. Fire Blast is enough to knock out the Nidoking, but we level up right on the Rhydon. So here we're kind of hoping that he uses a guard spec. I'm going to use Fire Blast once just to see the range. We did about half damage, and then we hit the next Fire Blast and just missed the range to knock him out. He had 5 HP remaining. So obviously a critical hit, or possibly even just a better damage roll, would have gotten us through that fight that time. A couple attempts later, we do get back to the Rhydon and get a critical hit, allowing us to finally knock it out at level 45. So we could get through that fight, but it took a ton of resets to get it done. We're up to 32 resets total in this run. We've added 2 TMs, but hey, we did manage to beat Giovanni on minimum battles. Now is where this gets really tough though, because we have to find our way through Lorelei, through Lance, and through the champion. But before all of those, we still have to take on rival number 6 as well, and he has a cloister that could be trouble for us. So against the rival, I think we just lead off with the Fire Blast against the Sand Slash to easily knock it out. And I'm gonna Fire Blast again here on this execute to stop it from using the status on me. Let's see what Fire Blast does against the cloister. We get the one-hit KO. Now we can simply dig against the Magneton. He uses a potion, but maybe this is the spot to use an agility. Now we can make our way to the Kadabra as we level up to level 46, but we're faster thanks to agility, and it turns out to be a 2-hit KO on the Flareon, but easy victory. So now it's time to just prep for the league. I'm going to take a quick trip to the power plant to get an extra rare candy, an extra PP up, and an extra max elixir. And then we can also get one more rare candy on the victory road as we make our way towards Lorelei. And since we're at least kind of close to being able to beat the game on minimum battles, I'm going to go ahead and get access to the Mimic TM. I don't really like to use generic strats, but there could be a situation where it's the best way to progress against the Elite Four. We'll also take this opportunity to get all the casino coins that we need so that we can get access to the Hyper Beam TM as well. Now, admittedly, I think that it might be impossible to get through this next section on minimum battles. In fact, Lorelei might just prove to be too much just in and of herself. So if we hit a wall here, I'm going to exhaust basically every possibility outside of just going a straight broken TM set of like double team substitute. We're going to just try to use the moves that we can normally use in order to try to get through this one. But if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out, and we're just going to have to take the L and move on. Still, I'm just incredibly impressed that we managed to get this far with an Arcanine, even with better stats. The fact that Kanto just hates the fire typing means that in general, fire types really struggle to get any further than basically the middle game on minimum battles. So we're already way better than most fire types would be, and that makes me feel pretty good going into this, that at least we're going to beat the game at a much lower level than would normally be the case. But with that being said, let's go ahead and try Lorelei for the first time. We're not going to make any changes to the moveset just yet. So Lorelei attempt number 1. I'm going to cheese her just a little bit because if we use Dig, she's actually got a high chance to use Rest on turn 2. That should mean we can set up a couple of agilities here, and let's see what Fire Blast does. It did really good damage, about 2/3 there, and now we can simply put her back to sleep and a critical hit one-shots. Here against the Cloister, we get a 1-hit KO. We level up here against the Slowbro though. I'm going to go for Dig here. It can use Withdraw against me, which isn't great, and Silph is obviously going to do good damage. So here, after a bunch of withdrawals, I'm going to switch into Fire Blast, just seeing if I can get down to a lower health, and then maybe Takedown can knock it out from there. Against the Jinx, Fire Blast is the obvious play, and now against the Lapras, we did about half with our first Fire Blast. I'm going to go for Dig here. We don't get a good enough range there, but I think if we had had a couple Fire Blasts, maybe one one miss from Hydro Pump would be enough. The good news is that the rest strat is really reliable here against the Dugong. It does hit me with a Bubble Beam on this one, but we knock it out. Fire Blast gets the one hitter still on the Cloyster. We actually burn the Slowbro this time, and it's an easy 3-hit KO. Here I can really finish setting up my agility on the Jinx, where Fire Blast now one-shots it. We missed the Fire Blast on the Lapras, so we didn't get to see the range there, but hey, we got at least as far as that Lapras 2 times in a row. Back to Lapras again, we get a critical hit Fire Blast that also gets the burn, and she's getting on fairly low health. We hit the next Fire Blast and we knock her out. So in spite of the fact that yes, we were on red health getting through, it is possible to beat Lorelei at our current level. So next up is Bruno. I do not expect this fight to be very hard. I'm going to set up all of the agilities though. He can use a move like Dig here, but after he uses a couple X defense, I think Fire Blast is the way to go. Out next is the Hitmonchan. We lost our badge boosts as we leveled up, but here we're just going to basically spam Fire Blast the rest of the way, except maybe Dig is better on Onyx. Actually, no, it looks like Fire Blast is the way to go there. And finally on the Machamp, we just one-shot it with a critical hit Fire Blast, a super easy victory. So now it's time for Agatha. I'm still going to avoid any changes to my moveset and just try to beat her with what I currently have. Let's see if it's enough. So first things first, I think we want to set up the agility here on the Gengar just to make sure that we're outspeeding everything. Then let's go for Dig, which is a one-hit KO on that Pokemon. I'm going to go Fire Blast next on the Golbat. It misses and she switches to the Haunter, so let's go for Dig. Then she swaps back to Golbat and uses Leech Life. So let's hit it with another Fire Blast here. It's looking like a 2-hit KO for this Pokemon. We did burn it the first attempt, but now it got Toxic on us, which is terrible. But here we can go for Dig. We get not quite a one-hitter on the Arbok, and she wraps us with the Toxic, meaning that we're definitely going down. So that was kind of unlucky that she got the Toxic on us there. Really, if she doesn't get that, I think we're good to go. So next attempt, once again, I'm going to go for the agility and then Dig on the first Gengar. Fire Blast gets a critical hit to one-shot Golbat this time. Dig is more than enough for the Haunter. We can finish setting up the agilities here against the Arbok. It even screeches us, thanks for the extra badge boost. We one-shot there, and we outspeed and easily one-shot the Gengar. So one reset on Agatha, really not that bad with our Arcanine. Even a normal Arcanine doesn't really have any major troubles there, because Dig is super effective against 4 of her Pokemon, and Fire Blast is enough to take out the Golbat anyway. So now we've made it to Lance. We still have 4 rare candies in the bag, but the real question is just how will we do up against that Gyarados? Gyarados is usually the run killer for fire types. Even something like a Charizard gets here and is trying to set up his sword stances, but just can't get him set up due to that Gyarados. But here we have the best possible stats of any Pokemon. So will it be enough to get through, or are we going to just need a ton of Hydro Pump misses? So the first issue, of course, is that the only move on our moveset currently that can hit this Pokemon is, of course, Takedown. And Takedown does very little damage, like only a quarter or so. So we get a Hydro Pump miss turn 1, we survive the next Hydro Pump, but clearly we're not going to get through this with any sort of consistency. So the question is, would Hyper Beam somehow improve this fight for us? Yes, it is about 1.5 times stronger than Takedown, but it could still be a situation where it's not enough. I'm going to test it one time though, just to see. So in the next attempt with Hyper Beam, a critical hit did basically 3/4 of its health. We get hit by Hydro Pump, we would need at least 1 Hydro Pump miss after that, but maybe then a single critical hit and a normal hit would be enough to get through this first Gyarados. The question is, how do we get through beyond that though, and I think this is where Mimic has to come into the strategy. We should definitely still be able to knock out the Dragonairs, but getting through Aerodactyl and through the Dragonite probably is going to require agility and access to the move Ice Beam. So I'm going to learn Mimic over Dig. I think this is the best strategy going into the end game. So here we do finally get through against that first Gyarados, and we get to level 50 where we could learn Flamethrower. We're not going to learn it since we've got Fire Blast on the moveset already. I'm just going to Hyper Beam here on the Dragonair. It's not enough to knock it out though. We do survive against the first Thunderbolt though, so we can knock it out on the next turn. Now it's time to mimic the move Ice Beam, and we used agility so that we can in fact outspeed our opponents here, but then Bubble Beam lowered our speed, causing us to not be able to get through this fight. So in spite of our really good luck, we just couldn't quite get the range to get it to go. So I'm going to try dropping one rare candy here to make it so that I don't level up against the Gyarados. Let's just see if that affects things at all. The first thing is, of course, that we can set up an agility, which will increase our special and also increase our damage output. And it could be possible that with all the agilities set up, we can simply one-shot against this first Pokemon. So after several attempts, I've decided to add even 2 more rare candies just to see if we get a better range now against this first Gyarados. So after tons of attempts, we are now back at the second Dragonair, but we get fully paralyzed, meaning we cannot survive 2 Bubble Beams. So even with all the rare candies used, this is clearly a borderline impossible fight. There is a way that we can get through, assuming that this Gyarados misses multiple Hydro Pumps, assuming that we have a way to actually one-shot against that first Dragonair to prevent paralysis. But it's going to take a ton of resets in order to get that to go. But a couple attempts later, we do get to the second Dragonair without being paralyzed. Bubble Beam will affect us, but Ice Beam might be enough to one-shot there. Now we're going to outspeed the Aerodactyl. It's a one-hit KO. And against the Dragonite, it's a one-hit KO. And we finally get through at level 54 against Lance, still on minimum battles. Now the problem is that we don't have any more rare candies in the bag. We used the last rare candy in order to get to level 53 in order to get through that fight. So we're going to have to really get good luck here on the champion if we're going to make this go. The first thing that we have to see is if it's possible to simply one-shot the first Sandslash with Fire Blast. If we can do it, we can definitely go for the Hyper Beam on the Alakazam. I think I'm going to try to mimic the move Hypnosis from that Exeggutor, and from there we're really just hoping for good Hypnosis luck to try to get through this one. Let's see if it actually works out as planned. So first attempt against the champion. Let's see Fire Blast. It does one-shot the Sandslash. Here we can go Hyper Beam on Alakazam and get the one-hitter. And now it's time to mimic Hypnosis. We survive a Stomp and Fire Blast should do the job right here. I'm simply going to stick with Fire Blast against the Magneton. It Thunderbolts me, but it's a 2-hit KO. Now on Cloyster, I go for Hypnosis and I miss. It gets me in Clamp and we just couldn't survive there. Let's take another attempt though, because this is clearly possible. One more time we one-shot the Sandslash. We miss the Hyper Beam on the Alakazam, but we hit it the next turn. Back to the Mimic for Hypnosis. And then Fire Blast to finish off the Exeggutor. We go Hypnosis on Magneton this time just to put it to sleep to give us a little extra time to knock it out. Onto the Cloyster. We miss the Hypnosis. It hits Clamp. But if we can just get released, we manage to hit Hypnosis now. Fire Blast knocks it out with a single critical hit. Now we've leveled up to level 55 going into the Flareon. It goes Quick Attack and then it goes for Reflect. And the problem here is simply that we don't have any good moves against this Pokemon. I'm going to go for the Fire Blast here because it used Reflect. It wakes up, but then Hyper Beam ends it. And at level 55, we have beaten the entire game with our legendary Arcanine. So that was ridiculous. It ended up taking 103 resets, 4 TMs, and a broken TM in order to beat the entire game, leaving us with a score of 75.7 on my scoring system. So on the one hand, it is absolutely better. Keep in mind that with a normal Arcanine, you would have to use double team substitute strats to even get through Giovanni on minimum battles, but it's definitely not perfect. It basically tells us that even with Mewtwo level stats, bad typings are still bad typings and they're still going to struggle late into the game. But stats do make up a little bit and give us the possibility, together with the badge boost glitch from agility, to actually beat the game on minimum battles. Which has me kind of thinking, how would the weakest Pokemon in the game do if it had Mewtwo's stats? What if we gave a Weedle access to the same stats as we just gave this Arcanine? Normally, Weedle completely fails against Agatha, but could it finally manage to beat the game in a solo challenge, even if it needs to get to level 100, if it just had the best stats in the game? That's something we'll check out next time, but for today, we finished. Thank you very much for watching. Thanks to the channel members. I'll see you in the next one. Later.